There's a rhythm to this life. Strange, persistent. You do it still. Get up each day, go through the motions. Not out of comfort or ease, but because somewhere deep down, it offers a sense of meaning. This is the unseen part of a knight's world, the part harder to grasp than warfare. Battles are written in the annals, your victories, your coat of arms. But those quieter moments, unfinished letters, lullabies half remembered, the creaking hush of a sleeping great hall, those are the real record of who you were. The day begins early. You rise stiffly, joints protesting, the chill reaching your bones more than it used to. The steward offers a silent nod. Your squire walks behind, a little more solemn than he was when younger. It all seems normal until you step out and realize something subtle has changed. Not the weather, nor the sky, but something deeper in the air itself. Fewer hooves clatter down the road. Fewer hands lift in salute. The banners are still raised, but they droop slightly, like they know they belong to an age slipping away. Your role, once pivotal, now feels ceremonial. You still ride out, armor buckled tight, still drill the young ones who march into the courtyard with ambition in their eyes. But even they seem to peer past you, past your silvered mail, to the men drawing strange contraptions, or to officers barking commands to lines of pikemen with gunpowder at their sides. The next era doesn't ride in on horseback. The first time you watch a musket fired in true fury, it unsettles you. There's no elegance in it, no pageantry. Just a thunderclap, a plume of smoke, and someone crumples. From a distant hilltop, you watch in silence, flanked by your men. Later, you clean your sword. Out of habit, pride, or maybe a quiet defiance. The lord who used to summon you for every border flare-up now sends word only in winter, asking for harvest counts, tenant lists, tax returns. The fighting still exists, yes, but led by men with maps, not knights. You're included out of tradition. Your advice is acknowledged with a courteous nod, then shelved. The great halls echo with less noise. The old names you recited as a squire fade from courtly conversation. Those who still gather wear more age than polish. The crests on their tabards are faded. You greet them with nods, not words, because you all know and don't want to say it aloud. Your armor, once gleaming with fresh oil, sits in storage more often now, polished less frequently. The squire still maintains it, mostly out of respect. The weight isn't just physical anymore. It carries memory. Every dent whispers a tale. Every worn strap remembers a charge. Occasionally, you still wear it. Ceremonies, parades, formalities. A child once asked if it was real. You didn't bother correcting them when they called it old-fashioned. The performance remains, though the cracks show. Feast days bring fewer guests. Nobles send representatives instead of arriving themselves. The herald's voice calling out lineages sounds thinner now. The ballads sung still honor the age of knights, but always in past tense. You listen with a small smile, raise your goblet when they reach the verse that begins, "In days of yore," and feel their eyes on you. Sometimes you dream again. Battles, broken lances, searching for your sword. Other times, you wander old corridors in sleep, corridors that crumble beneath your feet. Names echoing that no one says anymore. Once, you soared in a dream, high above fields, rivers, and the manor. You awoke smiling. Not every moment is grand. Most aren't. Mud tracked inside. A loose floorboard that catches your heel. A bucket tipped too far. A burnt crust. A cough in the dark that forces you upright, listening. This is the quiet struggle. What fills the spaces between armor and war. And on rare feast days, public blends with private. Music swells. There is dancing of a sort. You mostly watch. But once in a while, someone pulls you into the circle. You move stiffly, laugh awkwardly. Your wife laughs harder. The servants chuckle briefly. You offer gifts, bread, smoked cheese, maybe a few coins. Children race across the courtyard, while the elderly pretend their joints don't ache under the sun. For an hour or two, no one is taxed or commanded. You watch, not as a knight, not even as a landholder, but simply as a man. A tired man, quietly grateful. Your hound rests its head against your boot. You scratch behind its ear and exhale. You're weary. Not the kind of tired that battle leaves behind, but something heavier. A fatigue from carrying not just sword and shield, but responsibility, legacy, memory. Still you do it, because this rhythm persists. This stubborn, strange beat between your duties. Not comfort, not peace exactly, but something close to purpose. You are more than a warrior. You are judge, landlord, and enforcer, all wrapped into one. You hold the power to bless and to punish. When visiting nobles or knights arrive at your estate, it's not just hospitality, it's a strategic negotiation. You must seem prosperous without appearing wasteful, authoritative without threatening. A misplaced word about the king's taxes could mark you as rebellious. An undercooked pigeon could offend a guest whose brother is an earl. You tread carefully, balancing tradition, power, and social dance. But your life isn't solely composed of formality and vigilance. There are still pockets of stillness. You ride alone at sunrise, dew clinging to your boots, nodding to shepherds who've been awake longer than you. You sit by the hearth in winter as your steward mutters numbers into the firelight, a shared silence between men worn by duty. You share mead with your sergeant, both of you wincing as stiff backs protest against the bench. You may command the land, but you are also its prisoner. Too much time away, and things fall apart. A cousin challenges your claim. The grain spoils, a fence collapses, a contract goes unsigned. Even the court, meant to be the center of order, feels like abandonment when you travel. You return to find chaos, a broken gate, a bruised child, a fence split by a stubborn cow. Yet you remain tethered. You take pride not in the titles, but in the scaffolding of responsibility. You keep this place from crumbling. You settle grievances before they flare into vendettas. You sign births, preside over weddings, and whisper comfort at deathbeds. You are part of the land's cycle, its breath, its pulse, its memory. This is knighthood too. Not conquest, not bloodshed, but continuity. The chroniclers won't record these acts. No bard will sing about grain storage or boundary disputes. But you know, a knight's blade defends his name, but it's the land that preserves it. And when the banners are packed away and the horses stabled, this rhythm of decisions and care is what truly remains. At day's end, when the last fire dims and the ledgers are stowed, you find yourself with what no one teaches, your private self. You would think, after years of drills, battles, and estate management, that you'd collapse into dreamless sleep. But sleep plays hard to get. Comfort is inconsistent. The truth is, rest is another kind of discipline, a reward, not a guarantee. Your bed isn't luxurious. It's a wooden frame, its mattress, a blend of straw and wool. The sheets carry the scent of sweat and smoke, reminders of years of use. You might share the space with your wife, or not. Sometimes, it's only your armor beside you, cooling after a long march, whispering faint clicks as the metal settles. You don't sleep straight through. No night does. Rest comes in segments, shattered by patrols, old injuries, or the habit of midnight prayers. Sometimes, it's the wind that wakes you. Sometimes it's something smaller, a creak in the floorboards, a cough from the next room. You rise, just in case. Other nights, it's not noise, but thought that steals sleep. You find yourself haunted not by enemies, but by ledgers. You replay failed tilts. You wonder if your steward inflated the numbers. You regret words you said, or didn't. You shift, trying to outrun your own mind. Still, there is warmth here. Laughter flickers among the shadows. The Great Hall is more than a courtroom. It's your living room, your stage, your sanctuary. Sometimes a bard visits, spinning tales of faraway battles or love-struck fools. You know the endings, but you listen anyway. Familiarity has a strange kind of comfort. On quieter nights, games fill the space. Dice, chess, or backgammon. You cheat when you think no one is watching, or you lose spectacularly, blaming the firelight or the wine. The others laugh. Someone brings more ale. A dog steals a bone. It's messy, unpolished, but it feels alive. The grand feasts are rare now, but they happen. Loud, greasy affairs with spilled drinks and juggled apples, where everyone drinks too much and jokes flow faster than sense. You sit at the head of the table, not far from the hearth, drinking with your men, raising a toast to your aging squire, tossing a scrap to the hound under your feet. The fool tells crude jokes about bishops and earls. You laugh louder than you should, just to prove you're in on the joke. It's a fragile sort of peace, kept alive by roasted meat and goodwill. And some evenings, the noise fades. A servant plays a lute. Your wife embroiders by the fire. You drift in your chair, awakened only when the logs collapse in a burst of sparks. In those moments, it all pauses. The castle breathes. The servants sleep. Your squire lingers, maybe hoping for a compliment, maybe just dreading the cold straw mat. You send him off gently. He's earned rest, even if you haven't. Some nights, you pace the manor, habit mostly. You check the locks, peer into corners, whisper into the night. Not because you expect danger, but because you need to move. You need to feel the stone under your boots, to remember this place is yours. Still, for now. And when the storm winds rattle the shutters, when the rafters groan like old men, you lie in bed, staring at the dark, remembering cold nights in tents. You tell yourself this is better. You almost believe it. Private life brings private thoughts, and those are often far more difficult to manage than unruly squires or tax ledgers. In the quiet of the manor, when the candles burn low and even the dogs have stilled, your mind begins to wander to places daylight keeps at bay. You wonder if the land you oversee is truly yours, or merely borrowed until someone wealthier or more favored by the king decides to take it. You think about the men you've slain. Some faces you recall with sharp clarity. Others blur like dust in the wind. You wonder whether your father lay awake the same way, staring into embers, trying to reconcile honor with doubt. On better nights, you write, or try to. The parchment stretches before you, blank and expectant. You scrawl expenses, draft cold, formal letters to fellow landowners. Occasionally, something poetic claws its way out of you. A verse, a line. You scratch it out, rewrite it, then hide it before your steward laughs or your wife discovers it. She already has. She's kind enough not to say anything, except when guests arrive and she places the worst of your scribbles somewhere very, very hidden. When guests do come, the manner shifts. Private becomes performance. You put on the mask. Floors are scrubbed, banners unfurled. The best wine is uncorked, though you're never certain which vintage that actually is. You tell the same stories, laugh at the same jokes, twice if needed. You nod along as a visiting baron tells you about a hawk that soared higher than logic allows, or a hunting dog that apparently understands Latin. You smile, sip your wine, and wish the meal would end. But when they leave, when the doors shut and the boots stop clapping down the stairs, silence reclaims the hall like a tide returning to shore. You sit by the fire, a cup cooling in your hand, and let it stretch. Silence. It's not emptiness, it's relief. No battles to plan, no rents to collect. Just you, the fire, and the steady creak of old beams above your head. Your body, of course, won't let you forget. It's a map of scars and aches. You know which shoulder will catch in the cold, which rib complains during storms. There's a finger that doesn't quite straighten. Tournament in Kent. A gash on your thigh from some border skirmish no one writes songs about. These injuries are familiar now. You greet them like old comrades who've overstayed their welcome, but bring stories you can't help but revisit. The squire once asked you if you ever sleep well. You told him yes. Sometimes, when the fire burns low and the hounds aren't snoring. It's a lie, but the kind meant to comfort, not deceive. There are dreams, of course. Some pleasant, most not. Strange visions of battles that never happened and of corridors that collapse beneath your feet. You dream of younger days, of hoisting a sword too heavy for your arms, of lacing your boots with shaking hands. Sometimes, you dream of nothing at all, and that might be the most restful dream of all. But rest is rare and dangerous. Let your guard down too long, and something always breaks. A horse goes lame. A cousin sends a veiled threat through a letter sealed too tightly. A priest delivers a sermon that sounds a little too specific. The world always keeps moving. So do you. You rise before dawn out of habit. You stretch before standing, because if you don't, your joints complain all day. You walk the perimeter, check locks, watch the sky. Not because you expect trouble, but because old habits die harder than old nights. You run a finger along the edge of your blade. Still sharp, still dependable. Sometimes you write again. Not letters, not poetry. Just fragments, observations, a phrase that felt good to say aloud, a memory you don't want to lose to time. The act itself feels like defiance, a small refusal to be forgotten. The steward finds one of your scraps once and asks if it's a prayer. You say nothing. In the courtyard, you watch your squire fumble with the saddle strap. You let him struggle a moment longer before stepping in. He grumbles. You smirk. You hand him a scrap of parchment with a line from one of your better verses. He reads it, nods, doesn't say much. That's enough. You sit together by the stables while the world wakes up, listening to birds, to hooves, to the clatter of pots from the kitchen. The day hasn't demanded anything of you yet. It will, but not yet. For a moment, you are not a knight or a vassal or a war dog wrapped in creaking steel. You are simply a man, breathing, remembering, preparing. Because when the summons comes, and it always comes, you must be ready. You know this. You are never allowed to forget. Sometimes, the world outside your walls sneaks in. A caravan of merchants trailing rare silks and spices. A troupe of dancers with painted faces and voices like spring thunder. A noblewoman riding past with an entourage, whose laughter sounds nothing like the coughs echoing through your stables. You catch glimpses of these things, like a boy pressing his face to stained glass, knowing there's a world beyond, but always just out of reach. You are not part of that world. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Doubt creeps in through those cracks. All the bruises, all the bleeding fingers and scolded shoulders. Do they really lead to honor? Or are you just another gear in a great, uncaring machine? And then, like magic, a knight rides by. Gleaming steel, a banner fluttering behind him, his presence part thunderclap, part myth. And something in your chest lifts. Maybe someday that will be you. Your humility is forged not just in hardship, but in deliberate, daily reminders of your place. You attend court gatherings, dressed plainly, barely more than a moving shadow behind nobles who speak in practiced tones and wear fabrics you're forbidden even to brush against. Their glances, sharp, dismissive, remind you that you are seen only when useful and blamed whenever convenient. When dignitaries arrive, the castle transforms into a stage. Rooms are dusted 3 times over, silver is polished until your eyes ache. Everything must be immaculate, and anything that isn't becomes your fault. A loose tile? Your fault. A servant's mutt bites a bishop's ankle? Somehow also your fault. You learn very quickly the value of invisibility, of always appearing busy while being nowhere near where problems unfold. There are festivals, though. Music, dancing, too much wine. For the adults. You watch from the edges, pretending disinterest, though your eyes drink in every flicker of color, every rise of song. If you're lucky, someone slips you a roasted nut or a wedge of sweetened pastry. And for a moment, the heaviness in your legs feels lighter. But those moments are fragile, brief, flakes of snow that vanish before they can melt on your skin. What remains is your station, to serve, to observe, and above all, to remember. Some pages find stolen refuge in books, if they're lucky enough to read. The old steward's quarters hold a few treasured manuscripts, bound in leather thick as armor, protected more fiercely than the castle's weapons. If you're fortunate, you sit near the fire at night as an old scribe reads aloud, tales of Roman legions, of saints who braved fire and famine. These stories don't just pass the time. They fill the air around your bruised body with something warmer than flame. And as your hands throb and your muscles knot from a day of toil, the voice of the storyteller stitches you back together. There are darker stories too, whispered during chores or muttered behind barrels. Pages who faltered, boys sent away in disgrace, or worse, never spoken of again. Some collapsed under pressure, others were simply unlucky. Their names fade like smudges in stone. You learn from their absence. You learn to nod when spoken to never speak out of turn, to study every expression in the room like it might carry a hidden threat. The castle is a crucible. Each hour inside it refines you, burns away softness, hammers pride into discipline. You are not yet a knight, but you are no longer a child. You're something in between, bruised, lean, sharpening into purpose. And at night, lying beneath a thin blanket on a straw mattress that smells like mildew and horses, you stare at the rafters and feel every scrape you earned that day. But what lingers isn't pain. It's a strange resolve. You made it through another day. You'll face the next. You may not be close to knighthood, but you're closer than you were. That matters. When you turn 14, everything shifts. You're no longer a page. You become a squire. It sounds like a reward. It isn't. There are fewer pastries and far more bruises. Your new world is shaped around one man, your knight. You serve him like a shadow. You follow him into battle. If he's wounded, you drag him out. If he dies, it's expected you try to die with him. You become a soldier's extension. Where he goes, you go. What he wears, you maintain. You polish his armor until your fingers blister. You sharpen his blades like a priest tending relics. If a buckle breaks or a strap snaps during combat, that's your failure, and it might cost a life. Your world shrinks again, tighter now, hotter. The warhorse you once admired from a distance is now your daily challenge. Massive, moody, bred for blood and thunder. Mounting it is a small war. Riding it a campaign. It doesn't care for your bruised thighs or aching spine. You learn to manage it, to coax rather than command. It's your first true lesson in leadership. Sword drills become real. The wooden sticks are gone. Your new blade is sharp enough to scar, and your training partner is less patient now. Each blow you land is answered by 3 more you don't. You bleed, you bruise, you grind your teeth and keep going, because grit matters more than grace. But your most constant companion isn't steel or saddle. It's fatigue. And still, you continue. These quiet acts linger longer than most battlefield victories. They demand little, yet feel ancient, sacred even, and no bard will ever put them to verse. That's when you realize something unexpected. Chivalry isn't grand. It isn't the dramatic gesture in front of a cheering crowd. It's the quiet choice, made in silence, when no one is watching. It's not about glory. It's about restraint. It's about remembering you are a sword that can choose not to swing. Still, the tension never leaves. One day, you're kneeling before a bishop with solemn devotion, and the next, you're ordering grain stores ransacked from a village too poor to pay. You cradle a dying comrade in your arms, only to trample a retreating footman moments later without hesitation. You sign your name under pledges of mercy, and days later, draft orders that condemn starving peasants to execution. Slowly, painfully, you begin to understand. The chivalric code is not a shield. It cannot always protect you from doing harm. It's a compass. It won't stop you from losing your way, but it gives you a direction when you're drowning in fog. On most days, that's enough. In the stillness between duties, you reflect. The ballads you grew up on told of dragons, damsels, and divine justice. But your lived reality is full of tax disputes, limping marches, and knees that creak louder than your armor. You were promised glory. You were given bureaucracy. And yet, strangely, you don't hate it. Not fully. Because sometimes, on the edge of a difficult decision, you remember who you once thought you'd be. And in that remembering, you find just enough resolve to try. You've met knights who twist the code, who wear it like armor while wielding it as a weapon. They quote scripture while setting fire to villages. They speak of justice while plundering grain from the poor. You learn to recognize them by their polished insignias and hollow stares. You step aside when you must, and when fate allows, you quietly resist. You are no saint, You've broken the code more than once. You've silenced men who had dropped their swords. You've claimed spoils that weren't rightfully yours. You've looked away when justice begged to be spoken, but you remember those who didn't give in. The knight who barred a gate while villagers escaped. The one who refused to torch a chapel, even when it cost him everything. The one who died on his knees, not in surrender, but in prayer. So you keep trying. You don't wear chivalry like a badge. You carry it like a habit. Each morning, like your sword, you pick it up. And even when it slips from your grasp, you reach for it again. Because without it, you are merely a butcher in armor. And with it, imperfect as you are, you might be something better. That you learn is chivalry. Not what the poets praise, not what the clergy preaches, but what you strive for, even when the world dares you to abandon it. And so, you ride. Still bound by oath, still fighting your lord's battles, digging graves for the fallen, feeding your squire when the pantry runs low. You nod to the village crone who still remembers your childhood tantrums. You return a dropped glove, even when no one is looking. Because you are a knight. Not for the strength you wield, but for remembering what strength is meant to protect. Years later, a boy will ask you what it means to be chivalrous. You won't cite laws or creeds. You'll place your sword in his hands and ask, "Can you carry this without letting it fall on the wrong soul?" If he hesitates, you'll say, "That's where it starts." Because chivalry, in the end, is not purity. It's perseverance. It's about falling short, rising again, and quietly refusing to become the thing you once vowed to fight. And with each of those choices, however small, you straighten your spine. You draw your blade a little more truly. You've trained for decades. You carried swords long before you were trusted to swing one. You watched men die long before you were allowed to charge. You scrubbed armor so often, the scent of vinegar and oil haunts your dreams. But none of that prepares you for the moment the trumpet blares and the ground trembles beneath your warhorse. The moment your enemy's banners blot the horizon and your hands must steady. Not from practice, but from resolve. The battlefield is not a stage. It's not a chessboard. It's a screaming, stinking maelstrom of flesh, fear, and forged iron. You can whisper prayers. You can recall the old codes, the sacred promises murmured under candlelight. But in the thick of it, none of those matter. Only movement, only instinct, only survival. And still, you charge. Later, even if your blade didn't bite bone that day, you clean it all the same. Perhaps it's ritual. Perhaps it's resistance. The habit is old and comfortingly mechanical. The Lord who once summoned you to every skirmish now sends parchment and scribes. Reports, not writers. He asks for tallies, grain stores, maps, and notes on tenant behavior. Not orders to march, but paperwork to file. The battles still happen, somewhere. You hear of them, read of them. But they are led now by younger men with better charts, sharper handwriting, and less patience for your kind. You are asked to attend councils not to contribute, but to be seen. A symbol of continuity, a ceremonial relic. Those great gatherings of knights, once full of boasting and tension, have thinned. The familiar names you memorized as a squire, spoken once in awe, are now echoes. Some fallen, some forgotten. Those who remain shuffle in slowly, their sigils dull, their joints stiffer than yours. You nod to them in passing, and they nod back, saying nothing, because you both know what's fading. Your armor is still polished, but less often. Not from neglect, but because there's little need. Your squire oils it out of routine, reverence perhaps. The dents whisper stories, each scratch a frozen moment from a different decade. You wear it now only on feast days and funerals. At parades, when children stare wide-eyed, one asked if it was real. You smiled, didn't answer. That seemed kinder. The pageantry persists, but barely. The trumpets blow, but with less confidence. Heralds still announce names, but their voices crack. You stand as they speak, verses that begin. In days of yore, and you know they glance at you then. You are the yore, now, and you play your part. You smile, lift your goblet, pretend not to notice when the seat beside yours remains empty. Another old friend lost to age, illness, or indifference. You attend these gatherings not out of joy, but duty. You are the past, dressed in velvet and steel, surrounded by the future wearing parchment and ink. Back home, you walk the fields alone more often. Your tenants are busier, smarter. They work with tools you don't recognize. Some carry coins stamped not just with a king's face, but numbers and letters. The blacksmith's son is learning to write. The miller's daughter wants to study law. You say these are good things. You mean it, mostly. But there's a whisper beneath your pride, a subtle erosion. These children dream not of squirehood, but scholarships. They do not ask to see your sword. They ask if you can read Latin. Still, you train them when asked. Still ride when the banners call. But your breath catches sooner on uphill trails. The sword feels longer, your fingers less steady. Your shoulder groans in winter. Your steps echo louder in the training yard, because the boys now keep their distance. Not from fear, but anticipation. You've become what you once watched, a symbol, not a storm. Even battle, when it does arrive, feels different. You are not placed at the front. You are placed at the center, safe, surrounded. For guidance, they say, but you hear, for preservation. You no longer lead the charge. You observe, you advise, you represent, and you smile, because you understand. This is how legacies are preserved, by turning them into pages in someone else's manual. Gunpowder does not care for your name. A musket ball won't pause for your coat of arms. The charge that once shook fields now draws fire from across them. You've seen horses torn apart mid-gallop. You've seen a knight fall before even drawing his blade. There's no honor in that death, no chance for it. You try not to resent it. You remind yourself, the world must move forward. The Romans once thought their empire eternal. The emperors believed their names would outlive the stones carved with their image. And now those stones are repurposed. Barn walls, foundation blocks, garden ornaments. Time recycles everything, even glory. But there is mourning still. A quiet grief that never wails but lingers, persistent. You feel it when the crowd claps politely instead of roaring. When your crest is described as quaint by a boy who cannot mount a horse. When your warhorse dies and the stable boy suggests a mule would be more sensible. You agree. Of course you agree. But something inside you flinches. You remind yourself you were fortunate. You lived, you loved, you fought, you came home. Many did not. You built something. You survived long enough to grow old, which was never promised. And still, in secret, you take the long way around the old battlefield. It's farmland now, quiet, rich, soft. You dismount and walk it alone. There's a patch of trees where the archers once stood, a gentle rise where cavalry once thundered. You kneel beside a worn stone, the inscription faded. You whisper the names that no one else remembers. You touch the earth, you close your eyes. You remember the exact color of the sky that day, bruised blue, trembling gold. And for a moment, the past is not past. It breathes with you. Then the wind shifts, the moment breaks, and you rise again. Not for glory, not for pageantry, but because someone must remember. You want to leave something behind, not just armor or land, but a voice, a fragment of your truth pressed between pages instead of buried beneath stones. You begin writing what it meant to be a knight. Not the fables, not the glory, but the grit, the truth. You're not sure who might read it. Maybe a curious boy rummaging through trunks long after your name is forgotten. Maybe no one. Still, you write. Because silence erases, and you've worked too long, bled too much, to vanish quietly. Visitors still come. Sometimes nobility, sometimes pilgrims. Occasionally, old soldiers with crooked backs and half-finished stories. They ask questions. Did it hurt? Was it beautiful? Were you proud? You answer carefully. Because it was all those things, and none. Knighthood, you tell them, was service. To a lord, yes. To a land. But mostly to an ideal that flickered more often than it burned. Sometimes, when the wind was just right, you glimpsed it. And that was enough. Now, you walk slower. The cane helps, though you pretend it's a choice. Your squire, no longer a boy, but a man in his own right, walks beside you, careful not to hover. He still calls you sir. You let him. It costs nothing. And in that small formality, you hear echoes of all you've endured, all you've taught, all you've passed on. One evening, without ceremony, you hand him your sword. Not at a feast, not before a crowd. Just the two of you, firelight dancing off the steel. He takes it with both hands, as he should. His eyes say thank you. His silence says more. And that's enough. You fade, not in disgrace, but in rhythm, like a tide returning to sea. The halls grow quieter, the meals simpler, the fires burn lower. You wake early, but not because you must. Old habits, your duties lessen, the land carries on without your constant hand. Fields are tilled, disputes are settled, bread is baked. Life, as it always does, continues. And in those still moments, between seasons, between meals, between memories, you feel something strange and unfamiliar. Peace. Let the bards sing of dragons and jeweled swords. Let painters capture golden lances frozen mid-charge. You remember different things. The ache in your knees after a long patrol. The crooked grin of a squire who finally landed a hit. The taste of watered wine and cheap meat. The clatter of boots on frozen mud. The warmth of a dog curled against your shin. That, too, was knighthood. And it was enough. You no longer dream of victory. You dream of harvests that don't fail. Of treaties that hold. Of children who don't grow up reciting war songs. You don't know what the future will bring. Only that it will come. Castles will crumble. Gunpowder will roar. Pages will yellow. But somewhere, in some court or cloister or archive, perhaps a tapestry will remain. A child might point to the edge of that woven history, to a small figure, Not the king or the hero, but the one in battered armor standing in the background. And they'll ask, who's that? And maybe someone will answer, not with titles, not with battle dates, but with a story about a man who tried. And that, quietly, without trumpet or toast, will be enough. You pretend not to hear the whispers from hedgerows, complaints about rents, murmurs about levies, and passing jabs about how your new scabbard probably cost more than a team of oxen. You smile, offer a courteous nod, and ride on, understanding that respect in these lands isn't built on affection. It's built on distance. Your manor demands as much of you as any battlefield ever did. The hall must remain stocked and secure, your garrison drilled, your walls reinforced. You remind the steward, again, that the grain cellar stinks of rot. You oversee the blacksmith, the cooper, the baker. You authorize mill repairs, arrange timber shipments, and once a month, throw a feast for the villagers. Not from goodwill, but to maintain the comforting illusion that everyone is content and loyalty is mutual. You officiate weddings, you sign apprenticeship contracts, and occasionally, you deliver judgment. Sometimes, justice takes a symbolic form, a fine, a warning. Sometimes it's more tangible. A thief might lose a finger, a poacher might be fined or sentenced to labor. There are gallows on your land, but you rarely use them. They serve better as quiet threats than as real solutions. You know this truth. Fear preserves order more efficiently than affection ever could. The church is ever present. A priest tends to your estate, and you fund his chapel's maintenance, ensuring your name doesn't accidentally find its way into his next sermon. You attend Mass. You confess sins you half regret. You donate just enough to match your most recent moral failure. Piety, you've learned, is much simpler when paid for in coin rather than conduct. Even your household is a constant juggling act. Servants fluctuate between loyalty, blunder, and barely concealed rebellion. The cook is fuming again, this time about flour. The stable hand claims the hay's been delayed. One of your chambermaids is growing overly familiar with a visiting knight. You pretend not to see it, unless it leads to scandal, or worse, a child. Your squire remains eager, but inconsistent. He forgets saddle straps, leaves your sword exposed to the rain, and once polished your boots with lard. You threaten to send him to the monastery. Later, you give him a rare nod of approval. That's all he ever wanted. Your wife, if you have one, manages her side of the estate with an iron grip and a sharper tongue. She handles accounts, oversees the kitchens, manages the servants, and reminds you, relentlessly, when you've missed a tithe, neglected a cousin's widow, or fallen asleep during Mass again. You've learned to listen. You've also learned never to suggest she host a feast without preparing for a 3-day skirmish over table linens. During famine, you become both judge and supplicant, rationing what little you have while begging your liege lord for relief. You know the hard truth. A dead peasant plows no field. So you give just enough to keep them alive, just enough to keep desperation from becoming rebellion. During abundance, you become visibly generous. Bread at chapel doors, coins tossed to children on feast days. Not charity. Performance. A show to remind the villagers who fills their bellies. They call you, my lord. But you're never quite sure if it's laced with reverence, resentment, or resignation. Likely all three. They bow deeply, but you see it, the flicker of judgment in their eyes. You pass by, heavy in your saddle, armor gleaming, radiating dignity. But you know, you are their guardian, their tax collector, their magistrate, and on darker days, their executioner. Occasionally, you host visiting knights or minor nobles. These encounters are equal parts hospitality and hostage negotiation. You must appear prosperous but not extravagant, commanding but not threatening. One poorly cooked pigeon might insult a guest cousin who happens to be a baron. One poorly phrased joke about taxes might brand you a traitor. You walk a tightrope, measured speech, rehearsed gestures, careful neutrality. But not everything is strategy and survival. There are quieter moments. You ride alone through misty fields at dawn, nodding to shepherds who've been awake longer than you. You sit beside the hearth in winter, half listening as your steward mutters through accounts while the fire cracks and pops behind him. You share wine with your aging sergeant. Both of you admit, with weary laughs, that your backs ache more than they used to. You are lord of your manor, but the manor owns you in return. You cannot stray far. If you do, something breaks. A gate, a contract, a fence, a man's nose. Even a short journey to court feels like leaving a child untended. Upon your return, something is always out of place. And yet, there's pride in that responsibility. Not pride in power, but in preservation. You hold this fragile world together. You feed dozens of mouths. You resolve disputes before they fester into blood feuds. You remember names. You attend births, bless marriages, and bury the dead. And in doing so, you become more than a knight. You become part of the land's rhythm, its memory, its breath. Sometimes, late at night, you wander your own halls. Not for patrol, not for duty, but because rest won't come easily. and movement feels better than stillness. The fire is low, the hounds snore softly, and your footsteps echo in quiet rhythm down the stone corridors. You check locks, adjust shutters, touch the edges of tapestries you barely notice in daylight. You're not looking for danger. You're remembering what it felt like to be ready. There are nights when the wind rises, pressing against the walls like an old enemy testing your defenses. The rafters groan, rain rattles the panes, and in the howling dark, you recall nights spent in open fields with nothing but your cloak and a damp log for warmth. You tell yourself this is better now, safer, softer. You almost believe it. The private life of a knight is rarely chronicled. No bard sings of slow mornings, stubborn accounts, or aching bones. But this is the life you've earned, the one you now live more than the sword's edge. And in it, you find something approaching purpose. Not glory, not comfort, but something steady. You write more now. Not poems anyone would frame, not records anyone would cite. Just memories, observations. A flicker of thought that might, someday, help someone else understand what this life truly meant. You scratch letters with shaking hands, curse ink that blots, and occasionally manage a sentence that feels honest. Guests come and go. Some bring cheer, some bring tension. When they arrive, your world becomes performance. The hearth is stoked hotter, the plates are scrubbed cleaner, the wine poured heavier. You nod, smile, flatter, endure. You listen to the same tale twice. Laugh at the same jest, even when it lands with the grace of a dropped anvil. When they leave, when the great door creaks shut and the echoes fade, you return to stillness. You lower your shoulders. You let the silence stretch wide. That silence, more than any title, any accolade, is your reward. You sit in your chair by the fire. The hound sighs beside you. A cup of something warm cools in your hand. You think of nothing grand. Just the crackle of the logs, the ache in your knees, and the way the flames dance in the eyes of the dog at your feet. You carry scars like rings on a tree. You know which rib still twinges from the tilt in Lancaster, which knee stiffens with every frost, which finger never healed right after a skirmish in the north. They are not marks of pride anymore, just companions, silent, familiar. Your squire once asked if you ever truly slept. You lied, said yes, said sometimes. When the fire's low and the roof doesn't leak, he believed you, or chose to. That's enough. The truth is, sleep visits in pieces. Rest is never total. Sometimes you dream of banners flapping in the wind. Sometimes of blood. Other times of faces you never meant to remember. Boys you trained, men you failed, enemies you spared, or didn't. These memories come unbidden. They stay longer than they should. You learn not to resist them. They are yours after all. Feast days bring their own rhythm. Music drifts through the hall, a lute, a drum. Laughter too loud to be real. You watch more than you dance. But sometimes, someone pulls you from your chair. You stumble into a circle of spinning joy. You clap off beat. You miss a step. Your wife laughs. So do you. Children race past your boots. The elders nod from benches warmed by sun and ale. For one brief stretch of time, there is no tax to collect, no banner to chase, just bread, song, and the comfort of company. You hand out gifts, cheese, coin, cloth, none lavish, but all appreciated. They call you generous. You nod. You say little. The less you speak, the more they imagine. The next morning, the hounds bark. The steward waits with fresh complaints. A fence fell. A calf was born. A tenant wants forgiveness on rent. The world, as always, continues. And you, still standing, still waking before the sun, still limping across frost-covered flagstones, you are still a knight. Not by lance or sword, but by endurance. This is the weight no one sees, the true cost of duty. Not the wounds of war, but the burden of memory. The knowledge that your life was shaped by choices no one else will ever fully understand. And yet, as you rise each morning, buckling on the tools of your trade, you know this. You're not done. Not yet. The world still asks things of you. Maybe not with the urgency of youth or the chaos of war, but with quiet demands that wear just as deeply. The road remains winding, familiar. You still ride it, slower now, but steady. There are villages that nod as you pass, children who point, elders who squint to see if it's still you. You tip your helm in reply. Some days you offer a coin, others just a glance. You are both legend and neighbor, duty-bound and distant. Your hands ache in the cold. Your back complains when you swing the training blade. Your steward suggests retiring from the field altogether. You almost laugh. Retire to what? The ledger? The hearth? You'd rather die in motion than rust in place. You still remember what it felt like to be new, to feel the weight of a sword and think it meant power instead of responsibility. You remember when armor made you feel invincible, before you learned that steel bends and oaths break, and sometimes justice never arrives. You remember your first wound, not the blood, but the sound, the sharp breath, the clatter of the blade. The way your horse bolted and left you in the mud. You remember, too, the first time someone called you sir and meant it. Not out of protocol, but pride. The first time your squire looked at you the way you once looked at your own knight. Awestruck, uncertain, quietly hoping you'd know what to do. And sometimes, by some grace or guess, you did. The boy you were is still here, somewhere under the layers. A little bruised, a little wiser, but still watching, still hoping. So you keep going. You ride when called. You train those who ask. You break up fights, bless grain, chase wolves from fields. You offer advice when it's asked, and more often when it's not. You hold court beneath your faded banner, and remember the days when it flew proud and new. You do not seek glory now, you seek continuity. The idea that something of what you were, of what you tried to be, might outlast you. Not in stone, not in song, but in habit, in memory. In stories passed down by those who watched you ride through fog with your head high and your blade low. One day, a child may pick up your sword. They'll marvel at its weight, its balance, the way the light plays along the edge. They'll ask what it was for. You hope someone tells them. You hope they say it was for protection, for promise, for the space between honor and silence. Because in the end, a knight is not made by steel or ceremony, not by titles or land. A knight is made by choices, daily ones, quiet ones, hard ones. The choice to rise again, to care again, to fight without hatred, to serve without praise, to bend without breaking. You've made those choices. Not perfectly, not always, but often enough. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the title was meant for all along. So you lift the sword once more, tighten the strap, nod to the rising sun, and ride out, not for glory, but because someone must.